And a very good afternoon to you, wherever you may be. We're broadcasting up and down the coast of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I am Tony D'Angelo, and my guest today is going to talk about two subjects that impact everyone's life. His name is Professor Bob Swick, and we're going to be talking today about politics and economics. And actually not politics in the political sense. Oh boy, there's a lot of places to go for that. But more or less the economic impact of bad politics. And if you stop and think about it, it's been 10 years since the financial crisis. I mean, to me, the wounds of that seem like they happened yesterday. I'm curious to see from Bob if we've learned anything since then, and we're going to talk about what's happening with a lot of state budgets and actually the most critical midterm election coming up in November, perhaps in our lifetimes, in my estimation. So we're going to be rocking with Bob in a moment. We got a retromercial for you coming up, and ultimately we got the best bump music here on this station. And I got the grassroots doing sooner or later. Man, oh man, how you gonna beat this? We'll be right back right after this, or back sooner or later. We'll see you in a moment.
I just told you that's Valentine Premium Beer.
Ladies and gentlemen, up and down the coast of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, I am joined by my friend, a longtime contributor to all of my shows, Professor Bob Swick. Bob is a professor of economics and accounting in Gateway Community College in New Haven, Connecticut. Bob is also an ardent political watchdog when it comes to economic matters, and Bob is frequently writing and blogging about things that personally, as a citizen, as a resident, as a professional, I won't get through the mainstream media other than the fact of reading what Bob is writing, as Bob diligently applies himself to these situations. And Bob has taken time from what is a fanatically busy schedule to come and visit me on a Saturday. Bob, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, Tony. Thank you for having me on the show today.
And I'm very, very sorry to hear of the recent passing of your father-in-law, and of course my condolences to you and your lovely wife.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It's always a hard thing when good people go. Believe me, I can relate. I always say to people, in practice and in life, I say, I don't know how you feel. I can't get in your skin. But I can relate, and I certainly can relate to that. And, it's never an easy thing. But
thank you very much.
You're more than welcome, and thanks for being here. It dawned on me the other day. I was driving down the road. Actually, I was upstate, and I was headed into New Haven and starting the climb down Route 44. We're 10 years after the financial crisis. Lehman and Bear and all the crazy stuff, and Bank of America taking over Merrill Lynch, and this whole nightmarish thing which happened so quickly. We found later on that a lot of this, actually I think those of us that wanted to see it and know it, knew that there was a lot of bad mortgages being written to people that really shouldn't have been buying houses, let alone owning them and investing them in them. But and the thing is, I never, ever want to live through that again. But I look at what's happening now, and a couple of things concern me. I want to get your thoughts on this.
Okay, a couple of things, Tony. Number one, I've always given the example in my classrooms with regards to the meltdown of 2008, 2009, and I said, a house is worth, let's say, $200,000. The individuals who are buying the home are saying to themselves, well, gee, we don't have any money to put down on it. The lender says, oh, that's fine, that's okay. As long as you're both working, you can show income verification. We'll lend you the money. So then the couple says, well, gee, we need to make some improvements in the house, and we want to borrow an additional $30,000. So can we take the mortgage for $230,000 instead of $200,000? Oh, sure. We're gonna jack up your rate maybe 0.25% or 0.5% and give you that extra money because you're not borrowing, over the valuation that we're coming up with for the mortgage. Okay, a year passes. Now all of a sudden, one or the other person loses their job. Their income is cut in half. Let's say they can't afford the mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Now this happens throughout their neighborhood, throughout the town they live in, the city they live in. Now all these homes are underwater. Now we have the beginnings of a major crisis. Now the crisis is more complex for the simple reason that a lot of these mortgages have been sold 2, 3, 4 times down the road, discounted, because of the conditions of the mortgage, so on and so forth. Now we got even more problems than we would have if just XYZ Bank of the local town gave them the mortgage instead of now some sort of subprime lender 4 steps down from the original mortgage is now underwriting the mortgage. So I use the second example in my class. So anyways, I say now that $230,000 mortgage is probably literally worthless because the house now may only be worth $160,000, $170,000. If you can get $160,000 for the house, they're still on the hook for $70,000, and they walk away from the property. Well, who makes up that $70,000?
Yes.
Multiply that by hundreds of thousands of homes, you have a full-blown crisis. And I use as the example, and I've done some research. I did a little research a few years ago on the meltdown. I use the example of Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers had roughly $600 billion plus in assets. They actually requested from the Treasury Department roughly $84 billion to borrow for a 6-month period to keep them afloat. And the Treasury Department rejected it. Yet, at the same time, Citibank borrowed in excess of $470 billion for a 2-year period, had less assets than Lehman Brothers, and was allowed to continue while Lehman Brothers basically shut down. And I never understood that, and the more and more research I'm doing with regards to this is that the government basically picked who they wanted to stay in business, and they decided to let go of these other businesses, other banks, and just basically forget about them and the people who work for them, and so on and so forth. So I still don't understand that 10 years later. I do understand, though, that the Fed president of New York City, of the New York district at that time, was the illustrious Timothy Geithner, who ended up becoming Treasury Secretary under President Obama. And that, to me, explains a lot of the issues, because I don't think he was well-versed in any way, shape, or form in finance whatsoever. And I think he helped basically create more of an issue than it should have been during this entire crisis. My gut feeling, however, is I don't think a crisis of that sort will ever happen again.
Boy, I hope you're right. I mean, getting back to the crisis itself, do you think bad mortgages was the main driver, or do you think the whole deregulation of financial products under Bill Clinton and Robert Rubin was the Secretary of the Treasury might have had something to do with it, with too many hands and too many pies?
I already say it was 60% bad mortgages and 40% the total deregulation of lending, to the point that he ended up having 5, 6, 7 down the road subprime lenders owning a mortgage, and in some cases they didn't even know where the mortgage originated from.
Oh, I know.
And that's what really, to me, caused the whole spiral to occur. And I will say at that time, a real quick story. My father, who was alive at that time, called me the day of the crisis. He had been in J.P. Morgan stock since 1960, and he said, "I want to sell everything."
can understand.
And he finally agreed only to sell 50% of the stock that day, which I was very thankful for, and he held the other 50%. And it was just what an incredible experience historically from an economics perspective to see how many billions of dollars was actually trillions of dollars was lost in a very short period of time. It's truly amazing, truly amazing.
Well,
I'd say it's 60%, 40 bad mortgages to the deregulation.
You know, and I get a lot of, in the course of a day, a week, a working day, or whatever, you know, I like to call them six-headed stares. People stare at me like I have six heads. And then somebody will come to me with some proposition or something, and the first thing I'll say is, okay, where is the custody of the assets located? Where are they being held? Oh, we use some independent clearinghouse. And I'm saying to myself, I survived this thing 10 years ago where, you know, I was watching clients who were going to these firms, and I mean, let alone the assets had depreciated. They couldn't get their assets back. Their money markets are at 75 cents on the dollar. I mean, this is serious stuff.
Yep. And I think that's lost 10 years later to a large degree. Because, again, when people are taking risks, if the risk value is low, they're going to create and or try to find the riskier investments so they can get a greater rate of return.
Yes.
Not realizing that the higher the risk, you know, guess what happens? It goes bankrupt. It's gone. It's a false investment.
Yes.
So on and so forth, you know. And that's a big problem that we still have, I think, 10 years later, since, A, banks don't really pay any interest anymore, so they're not a good savings investment tool like they once were in our economy. So individuals are forced to put more money into their pension funds, into their other investments, into mutual funds, so on and so forth. Who to believe, who not to believe becomes the big question. And if it sounds too good to be true, it is. It's simple. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
It's really something. I mean, which, you know, leads me to the other part of the discussion, or one of the parts of our multi-pronged discussion. I was actually explaining to a college senior studying accounting another day, another story for another time, that the difference between stocks and bonds, that stocks are debt and bonds are equity. And she looked at me with her very pretty blue eyes and said, you know, they never explained that to me in class. But anyway, that's an aside. That's editorial. But when you come to the whole nature of debt, municipal debt, the lovely, illustrious city of New Haven, in their refinance came out of New Haven, Connecticut, for those of you who are unfamiliar, came out with a 4.25% bond to, quote unquote, as Ed Norton would say on The Honeymooners, tide me over to the next meal. And I had a couple of investment guys running this thing at me, and I told them, you know, pretty much exactly what I thought of it and them. And my first thing is, I'm looking at a city, and I'm not, this is not quote unquote pick on New Haven Day. I do that enough. Right. But, you know, New Haven is a good example. You run the economy down, you run the spending up, you fall short in the budget, so you go out to the public and what effectively is a bad mortgage and saying, give me this until I could get everything back together. And it's, I guess my question is, leaving those types of situations aside, as far as obviousness, the fact that maybe this municipality with this really high bond issue doesn't survive and you don't get paid back, if at all, how much of that is there out there, and will that have a negative impact on, you know, our local economy, our state economies? And I mean, I get people say, you know, Tony, you're like way too negative. I'm like, and believe me, I'm not a genius, but I do understand that when you can't pay debt back and you have debt, you're in trouble.
Well, I don't think it's something that should be taken lightly, because again, it's just like a personal I'm talking 5 or 10 years from now, down the road, states and towns just say, hey, we can't pay this anymore. We're done. We're going to have to, tell some of our bondholders, you're not going to get any money. You're going to become a new Puerto Rico when it comes to bonding. That kind of situation is going to exist. The New Haven example is even more scary because unless a city or a state can attract business and industry that will create jobs, that will create taxes, they really have no chance of surviving given the same level of payments and salaries, pensions, and benefits that they want to continue to create. And it's problematic. It's problematic. And it's getting worse in certain states. In other states which are much more well-run economically, you don't have those issues. But I personally, and I know you wouldn't, buy a 4.25% bond in the city of New Haven because we both know it's a high risk investment.
It's then I was working actually under the monitor. It was last week. I was in the house, and I believe it was Stuart Varney I was watching, and they were talking about California. Now, when I was in San Francisco in, I'm going to say it was 2011, 2012, somewhere back there, there was a large tax increase that was voted on in California, and the governor, Jerry Brown, said, well, this is all going to go into a lockbox for education. Well, now, quote unquote, it's the schools are broke 7 years later.
Yep.
I'm like, where do you go? And not only that, but you're really not that far from Puerto Rico, which really is kind of becoming like a little tax haven. And if they get the internet up and have all that working, it's like, why do you need to be in California or Connecticut or even New York for that matter? It really gets scary.
Right. And I think, unfortunately, most of the elected officials in those states and those locations don't really understand the ramifications of chronically raising taxes, chronically raising spending, using state government as your own personal bank account and your own personal political patronage account to accommodate all your friends, your family, and whoever else there is to buy your power for an indefinite amount of time. It's got to stop. I mean, it's not economically sustainable. And again, I've been called negative as far as that's concerned too. But, the realism of the situation is when a state has a high-level short- and long-term bond debt, when they have so many billions of dollars in unfunded liabilities, what's the plan to pay it off in the long run? What are you doing about it? Are you ever going to cut spending? Or is your only solution chronically raising taxes to the point that so many people move out of your state, you don't have that tax base anymore? It doesn't make sense to me. From an economics point of view, it is no longer logical to me whatsoever.
Well, you had so kindly sent to me this morning, and I got up very, very early. Actually, I was going to kind of do so anyway, but the dog decided that he didn't see exactly what he had hoped to in the yard and began to crow about it. It's like, oh, okay, let me just start getting it up and putting it together. You had posted that Bloomberg article about the quote-unquote, in my state, Connecticut, this somewhat bizarre, arcane state tax workaround by reclassification, and I've heard about it. I formulated an opinion. I read the Bloomberg article. It was quiet. The phone wasn't ringing. I sat there and I charted it out, and I said, this is nothing but a shell game. This is nothing but a form over substance thing. And when I actually started to put this all together, and the amazing thing is, you have a lot of the elites in my profession. Oh, this is something that really is, bulletproof as far as government is concerned. And I'm thinking, once the Treasury finally comes out and says, this is something we're not going to allow. We're not going to allow an income-based tax on businesses because we don't consider this to be ordinary and necessary under the code. We just consider this to be a workaround. And it's like, people who understand that, they'll be heading for the exits now from the Californias, from the Connecticut's, from the New Yorks. It's just, how many ways can you slice up salami and call it filet mignon?
Right. And this particular workaround that Connecticut passed it's laughable just to read it.
It is.
And for the common layman to try to even understand it, it is just so out of touch with any type of economic reality for them. For the person who works 40 hours a week and the husband and wife make $150,000 a year, they're saying to themselves, well, why are these people getting this kind of tax break, and why don't we get anything? We don't get anything different. We end up paying more tax.
Well, and that's my standard line with Kathy, because we always, at least me, I use her children as quote unquote tax class examples. And, one child's in this economic bracket, the other's in this economic. None of them are, quote, they're all incredibly burdened by all kinds of debt, student loan debt, mortgage debt, whatever. And I just, as a non-parent, I look at that and say that is just like totally and completely terrible. How you can expect these kids to go out and make a dent and make progress, and you've mortgaged their future to such an incredibly unrealistic degree, and not made this more efficient for them. But believe me, that's another discussion we can have in the future, you being a teacher. But when you actually look at that and you look at all the crazy stuff that's there, it's, hey, Kathy said about, I could move her son to New Haven for purposes of this example. Well, he's going to get a tax break under the Trump tax cuts. And I said, yes, but if he were in the city of New Haven, his property taxes just shot up 30%. It's like, so it's like whatever you're saving on the federal level, the state is there to take it back.
Exactly. And that's the problem that, again, Connecticut, Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey doesn't understand. Government can't be just a driver of taxes. It has to try to figure out now how to do more with less. It has to do what businesses have done since day one. What can we do to make things more efficient? How can we save money? How can we lower our taxes to create economic stimulation? That argument seems to be lost nonstop. And I do agree with you with the example. You move from one location to another, one town to a city or whatever, your property tax is now tripled. How are you saving any money? It doesn't even make sense anymore, and they can't compete. They just can't compete.
No, and it's, I am bombarded every single day, because my business is not, I could argue my business is a capital business with the servers and the computers and all this crazy stuff where I'm on my hands and knees fixing things at 3 and 4 in the morning. The other night we had a power outage, and at Camp D'Angelo, when you have a power outage, all the alarms go on, all the animals go crazy. So I had to put all of that together. I can argue I'm in a capital business. I'm really not. So I get bombarded every single day with people saying, we could do your work for you, over here in this country where we have very bright people and we don't have all these regulations. And inherently, Bob, I can't do that. I'm too much of an American at heart. People fought and died for this country. My father worked hard in the projection booth. He was a union man. He was a devoted union man. Actually, those were like the arguments we would have about the pros and cons of union. Yet another story and another show we could do. But and I say to myself, I just can't bring myself to do that, even though it would be more money. But yet, if somebody's looking at this, or if they have investors, or if they're publicly held, it's like you're almost compelled to do that. And I'm back to where you're at. Right. How does America compete with that?
Well, the only way it can compete is it has to think smarter, it has to think cleaner, it has to do more with less. It's a simple solution. And I do applaud you, because you're one of the few business people who truly believe in the country and say, hey, I'm not going to outsource this to India or Japan or wherever. I'm doing it here. We're Americans. We need to stimulate our own economy here.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. But then when the educational system turns back to me kids who, like my standard comment to Kathy these days is, I'm going to go to the college and ask for a consulting fee. It's like there's more training going on at FFC Paragon than there is in the university, but for great people like you.
Well, I always say to a student who say to me, "Well, why did I get a 0?" So I tell them very bluntly, if you don't hand anything in, it's difficult for me to grade anything. We'll get a 0. There's not much I can do for you. So explain to me what would you like me to do. So it's classic. After 36 years of teaching, I've heard it all plus more, and that's one thing that still bothers me to this day. Don't hand anything in, but expect a good grade. Okay.
Yeah,
Explain to me how you want me to do that.
Well, as we were chatting before we were on, it's like, with all the things we've seen lately as far as developments and things and axioms that we thought were tried and true that aren't, I hope you're not around to see the day when somebody explains to you how you're supposed to do that.
Right. I truly hope I'm not around either. I won't accept that. That's for sure.
Man, oh man. Actually, bringing us to our last subject, we've got our political climate such as it is. I grew up during a time, you grew up during a time when people had their differences and they worked to reconcile their differences. I mean, it wasn't the good old days. A lot of bad things went on, but yet it always seemed, at least to the end observer, that the ship will eventually come back into the lane.
Right.
Now we've got economic policies by our current administration that at least, we're in Connecticut. We don't see everything that's happening in other parts of the country. But when I go or when I talk to other parts of the country, people are really, like, hey, I didn't have a job before. Now I've got one. I'm able to invest. The 100% expensing in the tax code has allowed me to get new equipment. I just completed a return the other day for a longtime client, and I knew about it, I studied it, but the whole, bonus depreciation thing, it's like he came out with a really nice break, but yet we're in this climate of what it is like, I agree with Neil Cavuto on Fox where he calls it moral bankruptcy, and I don't know which end is up some days. I don't know what we have to do, but I'm sure you think about this as well.
Well, I think, again, since I try to follow what's going on in our government and in our society as closely as I do, I say this all the time, I truly resent government officials, elected government officials, people who work for government that take advantage of taxpayers, of abused taxpayers, of disrespect taxpayers. I truly take great annoyance. It bothers me to no end to see this occurring. So I want to bring it to the public eye as much as I can for the simple reason I want other people become like myself and question, why is this occurring? Why does this happen? Why this is against the law? Why does this occur?
And nothing ever happens to change it, or so it seems.
And what we have right now, we're living through, to me, history again, because our history since 1776 of our country has been ebbs and flows of corruption, of ebbs and flows of moral bankruptcy, then the flows of true, pure patriotism and spirit. And we're undergoing through a big social upheaval right now. I almost compare it to the 1960s to a large degree, where one group wants to be in power over the other group and will do anything they possibly can to become and stay in power. And I think the great silent majority spoke up with the election of President Trump in 2016, and they're still sitting on the sidelines. They're taking it all in, and I really believe they're going to speak out again in November 2018 to say, we don't accept this. We don't like seeing what's going on here. We will vote for people who are more conservative. We will vote for Republican candidates. We will continue to see a majority in the House and the Senate. We're going to see states change possibly their House and Senate and governorships because people are fed up with the way things are being run. And yes, we are morally bankrupt to a certain degree, but we also have many, many moral people who believe in our country, who believe our country is the greatest country in the world, who believe people will do anything to get into this country, and we will try to maintain that for as long as we possibly can. And as far as I'm concerned, President Trump is doing an excellent job economically. He's showing to the rest of the world, hey, this is what needs to be done. Let's work together and do it. Contrary to what the media says, contrary to the 80% anti-Trump news that we have to be digesting on a daily basis, we're undergoing such an economic expansion right now. It's incredible. And it's completely lost in the media. So I applaud President Trump with what he's doing. I hope he continues. I hope he gets reelected. And I think this November 2018 election upcoming is going to be, to a certain degree, a referendum on him, but more so a referendum on the silent majority, who will continue to speak up like they did in 2016 in the presidential election. We don't need elitist politicians. We need normal politicians. We need politicians who see that government has to be leaner, government has to be smaller, government cannot overtax. Let's get our country moving again, and just let the economic engine move it so that the tax revenue comes in and things will be 100% better.
Well, and it makes me think of Gerry Ford when he was president. Now, Gerry did a number of things in his career. I'm still very angry with Gerry Ford and the Warren Commission, but that's, that to me is probably one bad thing and a number of good things as far as being an accidental president, as far as being a congressman, as far as being a people's guy. And he would always say, we have to fix this system to make it work for people. And don't look to me to be a genius. He was famous for saying, I'm a Ford and not a Lincoln. And
right.
It's like, to me, he was like the last guy like that we had. And of course he wasn't going to survive because there was so much anti-Nixon sentiment. But boy, I just think it would have been a better United States if he was able to, and he took a lot of heat for pardoning Nixon, and the people that vilified him. I remember Bob Schieffer saying I hated his guts and on CBS, but years later he did the exactly right thing because the government didn't need any more bile. At that point.
Right.
But just to have a guy like that back again, and then I think of Democrats. You and I tend to go to the more conservative side, but I used to watch Bill Bradley in New Jersey, and at the time I thought, but now it's like he comes on Bloomberg or wherever he happens to be. Bob, he'd be too right-wing for the Republican Party. It's amazing.
Right, exactly. And again, once the Republican Party, in my opinion, shakes out the rhinos, the Republican in name only, and it starts turning more moderate, conservative, I think the party would be much better able to govern and lead in the country. Until that time, you're going to have the disruption that you have. The Democratic Party has reached the as far left as it possibly can go, including socialism. It's lost its entire moderate base. It's lost any conservatives that has left in the party. So we have two diametrically opposed parties that we're dealing with,
and we keep moving farther apart.
Yeah, and there's no middle ground in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so if this is the way it has to be, our government has to run. Therefore, it's going to run until it starts to go back towards center. And it's going to be a long time, in my opinion. And I do agree with you. One of the best things Ford ever did was pardon Nixon, and as much as the heat he took for it was the best thing he ever could have done.
The country had to heal, and that's and he was absolutely, and as Archie Bunker, I used to say on All in the Family, he did an okay job as president for a guy that got kicked in the head playing ball. That was one of his better. But you could use that at your next Packers gathering. But anyway, listen. As always, it's been a treat, an absolute treat. Where can our friends and fans follow you and reach you and share your good work?
You can check out my blog at swick.blogspot.com, and also check out our football memorabilia magazine, gridirongritsmagazine.com.
Fantastic. Bob, you have a great day, and thanks so much for being with us.
You're welcome, Tony. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
"1968 is happening. Something young, is happening. The young mobiles from Oldsmobile. They're what's young, what's fun, what Olds is all about. Young. It's in the look. Fresh, young styling. This Cutlass S, for instance, youngest of the 68 Oldsmobiles. New handling and ride, young in the way it moves. You can have a 350 cubic inch rocket V8, one of the new generation of rocket engines. Discover the young ideas in any Olds Cutlass, in any of the 1968 Young Mobiles. From Oldsmobile, at your nearest Olds dealers.
Well, it may not be autumn in New York right where I'm sitting, but it's certainly autumn in New England. And we've had a great show today. Special thanks to Ballantine Beer, the 1968 Oldsmobile Cutlass. I had one. Man, that car could go. The incomparable, sassy Sarah Vaughan, and my great guest, Professor Bob Swick. So, to all of the stations up and down the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, wherever you may be listening, this is Tony D'Angelo saying, as Harry Harrison used to say on WABC, unwrap this day like a precious gift. Tomorrow is not promised to you. Have a great day, and we'll be seeing you next week with more PM Coast to Coast. God bless everybody. Take care.